Oos to those Dojamin tonight in the dojo, and oos to you, brother West Coast. How are you doing this evening?
Oosh, brother Seventh. I'm doing all right, man. Glad to make it through another week and to start off another week here at the dojo. Oosh to the dojoman of the dojo as well.
This week has been a very interesting one. So many things have occurred, and with all that has been going on, I'm sure many of the Dojamin are aware. But today's topic is a bit of a special treat for the Dojamin. Today we're going to reference yet another piece of literature. Today we'll be referencing the work of Master Yao Miyamiki Morris, discussing some information in his book, Awakening the Master Masculine. Brother West Coast, are you familiar with this work?
Oh yes, I am. Um, I think I read the book a couple years back, and my thoughts of it were it was a profound work and a very poignant analysis in regards to the esoteric and the breakdown of what the components of man from a esoteric standpoint could be explained as. So yeah, man, I'm definitely excited for this breakdown. It's going to be a good one.
For those of you in the dojo who wish to get a copy of this piece of literature, we have put the link in the chat and it will also be in the description box below. Sorry about that. For your purchasing pleasure, so that it can be for your reading pleasure. But without further ado, we're going to be covering the house of the man and the four archetypes within the house of the man, and explaining that each of these archetypes carry with them a set of attributes. And this is going to be a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting breakdown, because with this, we also require the Dojoman's feedback so that we can continue to have iron sharpen iron. So let's see, we're going to do a quick check in. I see that we have JBA in the building, in the dojo. Oos to JBA.
Oosh.
Well, I see we have 200 in the building right now, expecting more to find their way in.
Yes,
But
sir. So for this breakdown, yeah, let's just talk about the archetypes, right? So you said that there's four. Um,
that is correct. So there are four archetypes in the House of Man. And for those of you that currently have Awakening the Master Masculine, I'm referring to page 3 of the book. So we're starting at the very top, 3 pages in. The House of the Man consists of four archetypes, that being the warrior, the eagle, the healer, and the hunter. What do you think of those names of each archetype? West Coast.
the names. Let's see. So I think that the names in themselves, they're pretty straightforward in regards to what they're trying to express. Um, each have their own unique type of description to them. You know, warrior in its description, and eagle in its description, and healer in its description, as well as hunter. They have. I think that it's pretty accurate in my opinion. So when Master Yao speaks about the warrior, for example, right? What he's defining as the warrior. Um, and to add to this a little bit in regards to archetypes, this is a masculine energy archetype that Yao refers to. And so with the warrior, he defines it as the act of engagement, the capacity to confront obstructions in life and remove them. Then with the eagle, you have seeing the steps to make a plan happen, having a vision beyond the present worldview. The healer, the ability to restore a thing to a sound original condition. The hunter, the ability to be accountable for and responsible for the welfare of others. So, in all, I think that they're pretty accurate in the description that Master Yao is referring to in this text, and the type of masculine energy that it, tries to describe. So with that, let's build on each of the archetypes. Which one do you want to delve into first?
On the onset of this, I would like to dive into the healer and the importance of the healer, because as you guys know, speaking to the Dojoman directly and yourself, West Coast, that a term has kind of been echoed throughout the space a bit to heal before we and or build. And from to my understanding, there is a large percentage of men who have lived life without access to this information, nor do they nor can they conceptualize the idea of these four masculine energy archetypes. And the healer is one of the most important, because with the healer archetype is to return things that were dysfunctional or broken and or out of sync back to its original state. And before you can get to your highest self or your highest level of consciousness, the first and foremost archetype that one must bring online is the healer. So I would like to start to build a bit more there first.
Perfect. So with that said, in on page 5, yeah, Master Yao talks about the healer in length, and he has a few different sections, but I'm gonna target one excerpt that I think kind of builds on the description and explanation that you just gave, Brother Seven. So it states that consequently, the attributes and traits of a healer imply restoration, more so than just a simple curing of illness. By instinct, he seeks the original map to be used to steer the boat of life back to its original course. In this, there is great good fortune. The healer's teacher is nature, and his moral compass is his heart, his highest heart. Thus, he is always seeking to become his higher and best self. Only in this way can he be the highest and best healer. Now, with that excerpt, what were some of your thoughts on that excerpt by the seventh? That description.
Following description, I like to share an image, right, which is also covered in the book as well with the Dojoman. So, what are you looking at right now? Right, what is this? This is a DNA helix strand, right? And this is the image or icon for the healer. It's a short strand, just showing genes attached, right? And why is this important? Well, for the purpose of the visualization here, this is the blueprint or template for our natural origin, where we were once a seed in our father's loins, which was comprised of his DNA, right? And I know I say this a lot, that the body is memory. When you think about the fact that you were comprised of both your mother's and father's DNA, and for those who had that disconnect from their father, who grew up in a single parent household, on top of not having access to information like this, essentially their masculine energy has been dampened down and made to be dormant, sometimes for the majority of their life, by society, for the most part, the dating pool, women who give them falsehoods of masculinity, and some men bought into the idea because all they knew was the report of women as far as it comes to being a man, if those who have not been exposed to real masculine energy. And when I think about the healer's traits, all in all, it comes with being holistic, balanced, sociable, artistic, and romantic. Do with those words what you will. But the attribute to restore something to its sound original condition, that doesn't just include the environment around you, but it includes yourself. So if one isn't willing to do the work necessary to bring this archetype online, unfortunately, they may be holding themselves back from tapping into their highest potential. Now, each of us has the capacity to bring this archetype online. Some of us have that natural inclination where we're doing it subconsciously, but it's not really active. It's not a real activation of the healer, but more like I wouldn't even call it a watered down version. I'll call it like a cruise control. You may be very extroverted. That counts as a sociable trait of yours that you may have. You may seem well reserved to many people, or you are well reserved. That would constitute itself as a healer trait. But when you start to look inward and investigate it more, how can I increase this power, this energy? Because that's all it is. It's an energy that allows you to make greater outcomes in your life. But the beautiful thing about the healer is that it can help you as a bridge to the other three archetypes, because of that balanced trait, or the ability to remain balanced, will keep you from having the other three archetypes go off the rails, which we will discuss further as we move on. But let's Koast, if you had anything else to share, I'll pass the mic to you.
Yeah, I would just add that even in the book on page 36, I was just looking through, just getting realigned with the literature. It states that the healer is a restorer, Since healing is about natural alignment, to heal is to return to one's natural and original state from a state of abnormality. To heal, a male must know what is the original and natural state is. Of the four archetypes, the healer is the most difficult to bring online. It is the least young of the four. He is aggressive, but not in the macho, tough guy type of way. He is forceful with energy and feeling. His touch can be gentle. He would rather build than tear down. In many ways, the healer energy tempers and restrains the other three archetypes. Um, in listening to your breakdown of what the healer archetype is, along with what was mentioned in the book, a thought ran across my mind in regards to just this idea of having a balanced masculinity, which is exactly what this way of the healer or this masculine energy in the type is required of. And the question that comes to mind is when it's stated that in order to heal and get back into natural alignment, one has to, um, in a sense, know what that original state was. And for the brothers who aren't really privy, I think that my question is what would you recommend to brothers out there who are trying to heal in a sense, but don't have a direction because they weren't exposed to that original state? That's more that's a question that comes to mind, and that's a question that I give to the chat, and also want to know what your thoughts are in that regard, brother Seventh.
I would say to well, what not to do. Don't look at TV or certain forms of media to because they have masculine figures, and it's okay when it's on TV, but when it's in the living room, that's when everyone starts to sweat and start using terminologies that aren't conducive for a man to stand within his masculine energy. But what I will say is, I use myself as an example. Growing up, I was introduced to a masculine figure, but then, I lost him to colon cancer. And so that led me to becoming more of an observer on essentially who or what makes a man, right? How do men really act in tandem with receiving, this book and this knowledge, and then diving further. But more or less, it's not an easy it's not an easy road, but once you start to observe and take things that work for you, don't make everything law that comes from certain individuals, because you may have a commonality with the person or their message, but once they change course, you may not agree with them wholeheartedly. So it's good to note and take the key takeaways from what you hear or what you're exposed to, and essentially still search for that model, if you will. Right before you yourself can become that model, you have to go beyond your own understanding. So for me, I had to go beyond my own understanding, and I was exposed to many different types of men in my early childhood via my mom's dating habits. And then as I got out into the world, or the environment, I started to see men that were different from the type that my mother brought home when I was younger. And I studied them because in the back of my mind, these were men, right? They may not have been what one would recognize as a complete man or a wholesome man, or one who has his archetypes online, all of them, or maybe at least one of them. But nonetheless, they were men. And I studied them and learned from the case studies and or mistakes that those who came before me committed, and learned these were things that I didn't want for myself. And when I came to this knowledge, so to speak, it confirmed that what I was doing was in my best interest. So I urge any brothers who don't have that initial exposure to real masculine energy, because I think that's also an issue with some of our brothers. We've been exposed to an idea of masculine energy that wasn't by our own making, and it isn't by nature. It's society's Dollar Tree version of masculinity, and people have bought it wholesale. And now it's time for us to not be in a state of believing, but in a state of knowing what masculinity is, correcting the dysfunctional version of it that was given to us.
Well said. Um, to build off of that, right? In regards to the healer archetype and being able to bring balance to more of the notable three energies that, when expressed, most most people in society will say, yeah, that's what being a man looks like. There's a video clip that I'd like you to play, Brother Seventh, and it's a movie excerpt, because I was thinking of, to build on that question or that thought of what is a good reference for brothers who are looking for an example of the healer archetype, or at least a reference to it, and of course fair use. um there's this scene in the movie Lawless. It's with Tom Hardy and Shia LaBeouf. Quick background on it is, these characters, Tom Hardy and Shia LaBeouf, are brothers. There's another brother that's in it, and this is during the period of the West where it was the alcohol prohibition. Long story short, Tom Hardy and the other brother are notorious, for running their alcohol sting, and running their business as an underground. But their younger brother, who is played by Shia LaBeouf, isn't as strong, isn't as um, daring in a sense, and hasn't earned his bones and his reputation as a brother, because their last name holds weight. And the conversation that happens between Shia LaBeouf and Tom Hardy after an incident went down where essentially Shia LaBeouf ends up getting victimized by one of the other brothers, opposition, whatever. This is the conversation that is had. And I think this will be a good breakdown and excerpt of what the healer archetype kind of guides and shoots for. So let's go ahead and play this, and then, hop back on the other side, to build off of it.
Here it is. As long as you are my brother, you will never let this happen again. Do you understand? I don't think you do. I'm not built like you, Howard. I ain't never been like you. It's all right. Jack, it is not the violence that sets a man apart. All right, it is the distance that he is prepared to go.
Okay, I do want to, and this is great.
Mm-hmm.
So
Please, the floor is yours.
the realization of not being built like his brother, and then the phrase, "It's not the violence that sets us apart, but the distance the man is willing to go." A lot of things can be pulled from this, right? So when you talk about that balanced nature, that is touching on the healer archetype or that healer energy. When you talk about violence in particular, right, or the ability to get out there and get things moving, if you will, get all obstructions out of the way. You're touching into the, pardon me, pardon that sound, but you're touching into warrior territory. Now, when he talks about the distance that a man is willing to go, many men that see the distance that they're willing to go is touching on the ego archetype. So in that 43-second clip, so many things can be, interpretations at least, can be pulled from it. And at each instance, you can speak to those three particular archetypes. Now, remember, the healer is, yes, it is difficult to activate and bring online, but once you do, it sets the precedent for the remaining three when you bring them online. That way you're not going off the rails. You get what I'm saying? But let's go into being built like him, right? And carrying the family name. Because carrying the family name and being accountable for the welfare of others is the role of the hunter, right? And in this instance, Shia LaBeouf's brother, his older brother, who is holding him accountable and at the same time being responsible for his little brother's well-being, while he is essentially learning how to build himself up, at least in this instance, in this movie in particular, this scene. So let's go, so if you don't mind giving them an introduction to the hunter, and I'll pass the mic over to you.
Sure thing. But before we do that, I do want to double back on something that I think is worth mentioning. In regards to the healer in relation to the other three energies, um, what it really builds upon is understanding the function of the energy that you possess. And the energy that you possess, it being manifested in, your ability to provide, your ability to go out and hunt, defend, protect, afford, all of those external things and everything implicitly that comes with it, i.e. violence, aggression, whatever the attributes that it takes to fulfill that role. Something about the healer that I find very pertinent, and why I think that it's very important to those in this space, is because in the Western mind and ideology, it's very compartmentalized, in regards to its function and how we see things. Meaning, we come from a fire approach, which, that's a whole nother function, and we're in a machine culture in a sense of, you're only known by your use or your function or your tool. So if they've defined you to go out there and be the breadwinner, go out there and, defend, be aggressive, those are all things that are associated with your identity from a society standpoint. And I think that a part of the healer in its function and what it does is it helps bring internal balance to you while you go out and perform said duties. Because although those functions are required, what's really important is your identity and not identifying yourself by your function. So in the Shia LaBeouf and Tom Hardy interaction, the older brother and the younger brother, and the younger brother is looking at his older brother from the society standpoint and the reputation that is set. It's like, I'm supposed to be this badass. I'm supposed to be this straight killer, you know, cold hearted, all that other stuff. But to hear his brother come from the vantage point of how he conducts his business or his violence that comes with this business is really what the healer is about. Meaning that there is a function for this violence, but that's not what internally Tom Hardy's character identifies with. So for him, he doesn't see himself as this, cold-blooded killer that's just with a vengeful bloodlust for the sake of it, because that's what a man is supposed to do. We were put in these circumstances. These circumstances require this amount of my energy and and my light, because all of that aggression, all of these different archetypes are masculine energies that we all possess. So we all have the capacity for it, but how it's managed is really the object lesson that should be taken away. So if it requires you, and obviously the line of business that they're in requires a lot more aggression and a lot more violence, not being consumed by that or identified by that is really is the takeaway for me. And in relation to the space, because there is a lot of talk about how brothers need to do this. If we just stand up and the brothers just stand up and they were just, on they militant tip and all this other stuff, understanding the art and the science behind, violence and what that really takes, and knowing the cost of blood and the cost of battle. Um, People fantasize about what needs to be done in the community from a external standpoint, but they never think about the implications or costs. They think how they were trained. It's, well, we just need these soldiers. It's like, those soldiers actually are humans who have an internal compass, or more so, they have the potential for having an internal compass, but it ends up being exploited and making their internal compass be the function of their use to society, which is that internal break and paradigm. Um, so I just wanted to preface it with that before we dive into the other three archetypes, because those are pretty self-apparent, and those can be talked about ad nauseum in regards to what a man is, because we're more familiar with them. But this healer piece is the one that gives you that discernment. When we talk about the anima, we talk about that inner marriage. This is the feminine side of the male, bringing balance to the masculine sides of the male. So then you're a complete being, instead of just this one identified archetype where, you know, you're either the quote unquote in modern standpoints, the educated lame and the pookie, or the select or non-select, whatever binary methodologies you want to come up with. The whole point is each of these attributes are required in order to make yourself a total man, or the original man, or however you want to define it as. There's plenty of terms and what they call it. But the important piece is understanding the internal component as a primary, so then you can use the externals when necessary. As you go about. So you said we wanted to break into the hunt. With that said, we can break into the hunter. Let me see if I can find the page.
Before we do that, I kind of want to set the tone. And first and foremost, let me give a shout out to Brother Sheed. Thank you for, your support. Just want to give this brother a perfect. You win. Give you a little bit of fanfare. And I see that we have Brother Arthur Edmore here. Oos.
Oos. Oh, yeah. We can't forget Kane. We got Kane in the house, too.
Oos. King. Oos. Glad to have 600 in the building. Many more to come. But let's set a precedent now. Do note, Dojoman, that the awakened man is more concerned with the we than the I. Those who are concerned with the I are considered to be juvenile males.
Yes. Let's get into
that. Now, understand something, and it's beautiful that this is happening in real time. Like Arthur Vidmore said, steel sharpens steel, and or iron sharpens iron. So with this phrase alone, it is an indication that this is coming from an awakened man vantage point. Because a juvenile male would say something to the effect of, look at me, you got to catch up. I'm shitting on these niggas. That is a juvenile man, brothers. And is he beyond help? Depends, case by case. He still has the capacity to, bring himself online, bring his archetypes and faculties online, but he has to do the work. I see that we have Brother Kareem. Oos. It's going to, because with this energy, you're tapping into something that is bigger than just yourself. Right? And this is a perfect segue to the hunter archetype. So the hunter archetype has the ability to be accountable and responsible for others and their well-being. Not only that, they are providing for those in their camp, and they're providing for others first. Even if it means he himself must go without from time to time. Now, what am I saying? Am I saying give your last to random amounts of people? Well, if you're charitable, very philanthropic, yes. But at the same time, to those in your camp, i.e. your family, and when I talk about the family, I mean your household, it is a part of your role to provide for said household. Even if it's just you. But what I will urge you to do is, it makes no sense trying to be an island. Yes, it's true that you yourself can be a strong pillar for a structure. But what happens when you start to crack? If you break, your structure crumbles altogether. So I urge you to get with brothers in arms, other strong pillars, to have a stronger foundation. That way, when you yourself feel cracks in your armor or yourself, the pillar that's crumbling away, other brothers can come in and mend those cracks, fortify it, make you stronger. Going back to Art of Vidmore's saying, steel sharpens steel, or iron sharpens iron. If you don't have this support system in place, you subject yourself to multiple attacks on many fronts. And there's many programs that kind of highlight this, like My Brother's Keeper or the saying My Brother's Keeper. This saying here that I have on screen, steel sharpens steel. But note that again, it goes beyond the I and it's more on the we. If you've taken that first step alone to start and see the bigger picture, I think you're getting, I guess I'll give you 0.5% of the way. But progress is progress nonetheless.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And in fact, just building on that point about the the function of being a hunter, um, the part about those within your domain being the poignant part of that explanation, because at times I know that the the expectation, at least from a male standpoint in Western society, um, specifically to our subculture, there's this narrative that continues to perpetuate about one male being responsible for the entire collective, which is one not even feasible because there's millions of black males that you just don't know off of the strength, just just based off of proximity. But it's not even tangible because you can't be responsible for people that you don't even know. So this work and the idea of your hunter energy and you cultivating it and it coming online and putting it in perspective, having it being served to those within your domain or your circle, whether it be directly with a significant other or a child, or extended to you know extended family or family in your circle, excuse me, mother, father, grandmother, cousin, so on and so forth. But I did want to add more onto the energy of the hunter because Mr. Yao Morris explains that the hunter is a predator and his nature is violence. Little boys fight over toys and things. It is their nature and they can become quite vicious. The hunter aggression and violence is mediated by the postures and attitudes of the female peer group toward wealth and material prosperity. If the female social body is materialistic and ruled by avarice, males tend to be more violent and more aggressive. Very true. So, just want to put a pin on this real quick. Women ruled by avarice or greed. Um, these energies and archetypes, there is a counterbalance, which is the master feminine, which is something that we can discuss if interested by Dojamin at a later time. But getting back to the hunter in regards to how this energy is expressed, because these energies have to have a balance to them. Um, a lot of this hunter archetype or energy type is set by the the female group that they've been assigned. And I know that that sounds very eerie in how it's set up, or at least how I'm perceiving it. But essentially, the men will act upon what the women the women's needs are, in order to gain access, you know, reproductive access, and be able to move their legacy and offspring forward. So, like it was expressing here, if the female peer group is materialistic, then the men will um, essentially respond to that by, fulfilling that need. And you can see it play it out um, in real time, and how this space was designed, and the conflicts that we're having in regards to the balance of what it would mean for the subculture, our subcultures peer group to, come together. We're at a state now where a lot of the women are exhibiting masculine type of tendencies and behaviors, and not to be mean or whatever, but a lot of the males are exhibiting the opposite, because it's like a balance between the two. So and that's kind of what the expectation is, where we've been trained to be more submissive, but we want to call it's called egalitarian, right? Where we will concede and listen to our woman's point. But the whole basis behind it from an esoteric standpoint is that the cultivation cultivation of our subculture has set the precedence, or the female peer group has set the precedence, that they want these submissive beings on an energy level, although they vocalize wanting something that's of the opposite. And so the beauty of at least looking at this from an esoteric standpoint or an energy standpoint, you can see the way certain things manifest in real time, minus the propaganda and jargon that's mapped on top of it, i.e., your mouth is saying yes, but your energy or body language is saying no, which is why you have this cognitive dissonance where it's, you can tune into certain channels to observe this internal conflict where they will say one thing, but their posturing expresses another. um, but it's important to see that in how you develop and cultivate your own energy, because we are creatures, we are cohabitating creatures, and those energies can rub off on you if not checked. um but I want to continue though. the
Mhm.
hunter is the hunter is also competitive. The adult male peer group rules his competitive expression. The more this peer group values honor, the more structured is the competition. The less value this adult peer group places on honor, the more his competitive nature is primitive and without bounds. Brother Seventh, what do you think about that excerpt right there? I'm going to read this one more time.
Please do.
It says, the hunter is also competitive.
Hmm.
The adult male peer group rules his competitive expression.
Hmm.
The more this peer group values honor, the more structured is the competition.
Correct.
The less value this adult peer group places on honor, the more his competitive nature is primitive and without bounds.
And you know what? I'm glad that you read this piece, because this speaks to, the the tyrannical the tyrannical juvenile man who screams at the mountaintop of not having any limits or boundaries set upon him. He believes in scarcity, whether he says it out of his mouth or not. That's what his energy puts out into the ether, that he believes in scarcity. Because he wishes to do things that have no honor in them. And I think we've all been exposed to this. Many of the dojomen have been exposed to this negative energy, because with the house of the man, there are both positive and negative sides of each, or of the house. And we'll get into that after we go through all four archetypes. But with the hunter in particular, there is no code with this man, even though he may say there is one. But let me not say this man, men, because it's, multiple. Once you have those who believe in the same ideology as you tend to run pretty much a team of vagabonds, if you will, with no real honor in some instances. And each of you have no code, so to speak. And it's interesting that some of these things are expressed even in this space in particular. We could see it on streams. Those of you who managed to peruse the the YouTube streets a lot more than others, you've seen it once or twice. That some of these brothers are willing to die on that sword of primitive thinking, as opposed to having honor. There's nothing wrong with competition, right? Nothing wrong at all. So don't misconstrue my words here when I say these things. There is absolutely nothing wrong with competition. It allows us, it enables us to express this energy, but there must be bounds placed on it. Because if not, then we run into the negative territory of this energy. And once we get there, we tend to damage not just ourselves, but those around us.
And not only that, the environment around you. Because the beauty of being a human, just on a human level, right, is that you've been given the gift of consciousness outside of your primitive being or outside of your primitive faculties. And with that comes an inherent amount of responsibility. What do you mean, West Coast? So to continue the excerpt, right? Because I think that this illustrates the point that I'm trying to make. It states that males should live via a code of men, but in the absence of this sacred code, there is an absence of the sacred value of life. To hunt implies to kill. Nothing lives in this world unless something dies. The hunter kills to provide food. However, if hunting game is not necessary to provide food, his hunter nature still remains. The hunter desires to be the alpha male. This can be expressed via owning a superior house, a better car, an upscale job, or through other many means whereby he shows himself superior in some way to other men. If acceptable means are not available to quote unquote hunt, the hunter will opt for criminal means or antisocial methods. And so the point that I'm really trying to illustrate here is that understanding having a code, there is a function for having a code. There's a function for having culture, having a constructive social moray in interaction, so to speak, right? This idea of freedom, right, and living in a world with no rules, or because you're so tired of the rules that have been put in place. There, even the most vicious lions have a inherent biological code in how they maneuver and how they build. And what I'm really trying to drive home here is that when left unchecked, you really don't respect the environment around you if you don't check your hunter energy, or that energy of competition, for the sake of balance in the equation of the environment around you. Because the minute that you go beyond that or violate those principles or laws is when things that are outside of your control, I'm talking about, the idea of, the way that our climate is going based off of the materials and resources that we're using, kind of boil into. This is what, spells out danger holistically for the space around you. And I know I'm kind of going more to the environmental piece instead of the social environmental piece, but the same premise still applies, where, like Brother Seven said, there's nothing wrong with competition, but when the competition becomes detrimental to the function or the result that it's trying to accomplish, then you're not doing anybody a favor. And when you're in a system and when you're in a environment, which you are in, whether artificial or natural, um, either you respect those laws or you die. Bottom line, whether it be by another challenger, which most people kind of think of as like, who's going to challenge me and all this other stuff. It's like, all right, you want to fight a tornado or fight starvation. You talking about fighting freedom and defeating this system and want to tear it down. Then your next battle is going to be with the environment and the actual space that has been the condition that has been left in. And then you're gonna fight against starvation. and it can all like, as far as the logic tree and having that, and I think this kind of ties into eagle with vision that I'm kind of going towards, but the idea of the use of your violence and the excerpt that we talked about in, or the movie excerpt that we just looked at, and understanding the mechanics of why you're doing something, and in Western philosophy and just mindset, everybody's so focused on one specific task for one specific outcome, but they don't look at everything holistic. You talk about, what's an example? It's like, yeah, I want to get, hella money, and everybody else just needs to get their bag up. And it's like, the one in regards to fiat currency, you need you need other individuals participating in the system in order for that fiat currency to have value, and for your masculinity, your inner masculinity to be expressed, or for it to be able to be manifested, or wreaking reconciliation. But the cost of doing so um isn't worth the squeeze, in a sense. It's being expressed in a negative type of mindset. And so I want to wrap it up right here, because I definitely am on a bit of a tangent. um Having a code, and men having a code to what they, and how they express their competitiveness, is not only important internally in setting boundaries, but there is a multiplier environmental wise, both on the social and natural aspect, and how you see and view resources that can, be constructive to the world around you as well. And with that, I pass it to you, Brother Seventh.
Yes, I do want to note that at the root, the hunter is indeed, a predator, and civilizations, I guess, need or attempt to remove it is damn near impossible. So that is something that is well to note. But the need for balance, right? And this ties back into the healer archetype. And this is where the healer shines, because it keeps that predatory nature intact. It actually puts that code that we have amongst each other as brothers and as men, keeping us from getting into or going off the rails or becoming feral, if you will, in regards to competition. But as we traverse to the eagle, and I do want to note to the dojomen that we do implore and encourage each of you, if you don't have the actual book already. Again, this is Awakening the Master Masculine by Master Yao Miyamiki Morris. The link to the book will be in the description box below, and we'll also put it in the chat. But the ego archetype, and what is the importance of it? The ability to look forward and see the big picture, to plan ahead, arrange steps, and break projects up into phases and or stages that the end design may be achieved. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's use a real life example, shall we? Opening the dojo, for instance. This is a part of seeing the big picture for it. When we go live, some of the topics in which we cover, how we break it down into phases, the work required, going into providing a stellar presentation for you dogemen. We have to put our minds together and think about the best course of action and how to tackle some of these tasks at hand so that we can add value to you as you add value to us. And the end result comes from, ultimately having your time, which is very valuable. And we appreciate your support in that regard, as well as the donations. But this is a part of a big plan in which we want to add value to those who come and reward us with their time. So this is a big thank you to the 400 dojomen we have in the building.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Some of the traits of the eagle, as Master Yao expounds, are its logical left brain thinking, deductive, intellectual, segregate, and critical. Seeing the steps to make a plan happen, having a vision beyond the present, a worldview. The eagle faculty imparts to the man the logical and cognitive ability to forecast or project what the future reality will be. In addition, it gives the attributes of mind to execute the logistics, schedules, stages, and details of a plan, project, or activity. In a word, this energy is reason. The energy is not just comprehension, but the application of intelligence to solve a changing problem, with the key point being the change. What works today will not work tomorrow because the world is changing. The eagle knows it is not enough to plan. Plans must be made knowing or estimating what the new landscape will be and what the next situation will entail. In this regard, this energy gives man an affinity to see patterns and cycles in all life. In the juvenile stage, the eagle is a bean counter, a clerk, a bureaucrat. His talent is limited to mere analysis. When the developed eagle is the mastermind, the utopian strategist who sees all possibilities and fashions from the raw potential the best possible outcomes. And it looks like we got Brother Art, New Style TV in the building. Oos.
Oos, Brother Art.
But yeah, back to this eagle piece, right? This eagle archetype. Having vision and seeing things for what it was. I wonder sometimes, what is a good way for brothers to be able to see the bigger picture? Like, what's a good object lesson or symbol for them to, you know, be able to identify what that looks like? Because what I notice is, at least when I'm perusing different channels, when we talk about problems that face our community, face the space that we've been assigned to, brothers are able to identify symptoms, which is good, but they're not able to be solution oriented in their approach or their manner in attempting to identify a problem. And sometimes the problem that they identify isn't even a problem; it's more of an inconvenience, um, because their lens is only focused on a very limited view or scope of self. Meaning, something makes me uncomfortable and I want to fix it. How can I do? What can I do to take that pain away? And I wonder what's a good illustration of the eagle in media, because you gave the example of the dojo, which is definitely a good example in regards to how we see things and how we want to go about giving presentations to the brothers and being able to support. I'm trying to think of another illustration that may be good to illustrate that as well, because a takeaway from that excerpt is having the vision to view an issue as a changing problem. The problems that we've discussed in this that have been discussed in the space, they're still there, but the problem has changed in sequence to the environment that has been around. And being able to identify that and break out of um, mental loops of looking at a problem as static instead of looking at a problem as dynamic seems to be one of the biggest challenges that I've noted when I hear certain brothers talk. Like, let me know, if I'm going left with this, brother Seventh, but it, it's
No,
interesting.
continue. I mean, as you continue speaking, I just pulling up some, some
No doubt.
symbolism here.
Yeah, it's just more so in the vein. It's more so in the vein of um let's say, for example, what can we do to bring these sisters back to the table, right? And it's and for me, it's like, well, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking the wrong question here, because the perceived table that you're talking about and them coming back to it, um, they have no choice in the matter, and it has nothing to do with anything that is within your power, and everything that has to do with the way that the environment has been cultivated in the direction that is being cultivated in. And with that cultivation and the way that the environment come and the way that the environment is pushing them towards you, and when they come back to this proverbial table that you think that they are not there, that they're not there at, the manner in which they're going to be received may come as a shock. Um, what I'm noticing is, it's the, brothers having a type of mindset, a romanticized mindset, really. It's like when you ask that question, at least the type of feeling that I get, and I do say feeling, it's really what can we do as men to step up and bring them back to the table to restore the black family the way that we have been taught essentially, or been propagandized, uh pre pre 2000s and 60s, whichever era that you want to talk about outside of this era, because that's usually how it goes. It's usually the current era is always worse than the era before. And we did things back in the day, but we ain't never did anything the way that things are done today. That's usually how it's usually framed. um in that, when you take that approach, there are missing gaps in the environment, the environmental forces that actually are propelling the change that you're talking about. And the woman, talking about from a collective standpoint, that you're expecting to receive, um it's a totally different woman. And it's not a good or bad thing, but it's just an observation of uh what it is that you're seeking and how to actually execute in seeking it. First, you need to, and shout to, it looks like we got another Magi in the building. Oos, Magi Nameless.
Oos.
As Magi Nameless has mentioned before, where in accordance to the environment and seeing things as they are, taking it from the Dokudo. that's one of the that's a valuable principle or philosophy to take in during these times, because the question that you're asking for, the result that you're seeking and the question that you're asking for, you may end up not getting, so you may end up getting more than what you've asked for, essentially, when they come back to this proverbial table. But with that, I pass it to you, Brother Seventh.
I want to plant this seed in the minds of the Dojo men who are currently in the building, the 500, and those who may watch after. It's imperative for you to do this inner work and to get these faculties online, because on the short side of things, you are what you attract, or what you oblige in your life. If it's the dysfunctional woman that chooses you, right, the negative woman that chooses you, and her feminine faculties aren't online, but she chose you, and she's giving you an action so that you can act on her, i.e., sexual relations, you are now at the behest of this individual or this dysfunctional energy. Now, once you take into account that point and you begin to do this inner work and bring your masculine faculties online, those energies beneath you will no longer have that pull, that ability to pull you in so that you oblige such dysfunction. Now, what am I saying to the Dojo men? If she's throwing it at you, am I telling men to not accept the offer of sweet, sweet kitty? Well, what is the purpose of the individual who's attached to that, who's inviting you? Because essentially she has her own reasons, you know. You have to think about it. Last week I said that it will always be her, the ideology, until further notice. And her, the ideology, is dysfunctional, is an Amazonian woman, right? Is a, within her own mind, an alpha female. There's no such thing as an alpha female. It is an Amazonian who is attempting to be something that she is not. She's going against her direct feminine nature. And when you have a situation where a female is going against her direct nature and standing or attempting to practice masculine energy or attributes and or behaviors, eventually she will seek to destroy that which is original so that she can stand in its place. Hence why you have mothers who, you know, raise their daughters but love their sons. And they essentially impede their development from stepping into their masculine role. Because when one is not practicing or standing within his masculine energy or frame, he feels a sense of incompleteness. You know, and 9 times out of 10, he doesn't really know why. He thinks something is wrong. Well, something is wrong with him. He thinks that, but it needs to be confirmed. He doesn't know what the cause is until he comes in contact with real masculine energy. And once that happens, this is where we get things like the term, you know, red pill rage. They get exposed to the truth. a slice of masculine energy, if you will. And they lose that sense of balance because it's too much. It's too much to bear. Do pardon the dog. She's begging for a lot of attention. You may hear her whimpering. But this is important. And we impart this to you. I know we're not going in full detail, but you know how we are. We encourage all to actually get the knowledge for themselves, not to just take our word for it, but to read it themselves, and we compare notes. But with that, I will digress at this point. And West Coast, you have the mic.
Yeah, I think this is a good area to park this conversation. Um, all in all, with the four masculine archetypes, um, the warrior, the eagle, the hunter, and the healer, all of them work in tandem together. And the biggest takeaway from this discussion is, at the very minimum, seeking balance in all four is the goal in regards to the ones that we, have perceived it. The healer ends up or tends to be the most neglected because we've been conditioned to focus on the other three vis-a-vis, being more of a warrior or being more of an eagle or being more of a hunter. I think the hunter energy is like super popularized and everybody's most familiar with, and really try to exploit and, use to whatever means. And it's like the pinnacle of what masculinity is. Um, but it's honestly not. It's all three working in tandem together. And more importantly, the healing factor or the healer archetype helps restore you, so that you can be able to manage this light, manage this energy, because masculinity is energy. And we all have these drives, and understanding those drives and how to manage those drives first as a note, and then building upon and revisiting and seeing how they apply to your personal experience and what that looks like, because you can have a very different background or subculture or social class. They're going to be expressed in different ways, but the principle still remains the same. And here at the dojo, what we encourage the dojo men to do in that healing space, or that healer archetype, to focus more on that, is being able to understand the boundaries of nature and understand the boundaries of your environment, and sort of to what Dr. T.S. Johnson talks about at the end of his videos, where black men, you're no longer tools, you're no longer you know unpaid bodyguards. That whole laundry list of things are expressions of what the hunter archetype um, and some of the warrior express. And if you don't have that in check, or if you only identify by that one energy or group, then you'll be doing a great disservice not only to your tribe or your domain, but to your own internal self, because the mind and the spirit are very it's a blessing and a curse, in the sense of what you mentally set your mind to, or what you set as your identity, is what your self will go towards, your subconscious will go towards. So you are the navigator of this vessel. So understanding your vessel and understanding each component of it and how to manage it is the first step. But I think that this is a good space to stop off at. Brother Seven, if you want to send off the Dojoman with some words of encouragement.
Yes, sir. To the Dojoman, 500 in the building. Not to worry, we won't leave you high and dry. We will continue to expound upon this work of literature as you yourselves purchase and support Master Yao as well. And as always, if you haven't heard it anywhere else, you've heard it here in the dojo today. We see you, brothers, and we are proud of you. Stay vigilant, strong, and safe. Oos.
Oos.